we don't decide, we have our value propositions. We know what the brand stands for, but we don't decide, what marketing message is going to be the message for the year.
Hi, I'm John Timmerman, and if I were an animal, I'd be a humjagger.
I'm Rob Schauger, and I can't begin to tell you how freaking thankful I am that Mr. Dingaling finally got a new soundtrack for his truck.
And I'm Al Kutri, and if you're not first, you're last. Shake and bake. Woo!
And we are the co-founders of the NoBull company.
Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you by Empathy Wines. You might think I'm in their warehouse right now, but I'm not. I'm in my house. And I love Empathy Wines, love Empathy Wines. That's why, this is truly delicious wine. Even if you're not a wine drinker, you will become one after you drink this wine. Rosé, red, and white, too much of a good thing is a fucking great thing. Get some wine.
What's up, Buzz Nation? Welcome to I'm a Little Buzz, the show where we bring a ridiculous amount of life to business, all while sharing a glass or jar or cup or shaker bottle or can of whatever makes us happy, all while sharing stories about what gets us buzzed. Al, how about you? What's getting you buzzed?
I'm buzzed about following in Rob's footsteps.
Ooh.
And post my birthday, which is just next week. So I'm gonna be a slob until then. Mm-hmm. And then immediately after that, go into 75 hard and attempt to do.
Do I also have to do 75
There's
hard?
just do.
Although you're gonna be a different.
Well, gonna be what?
Cross that bridge
20
when we
days
get there.
apart.
Yeah, 20 days.
Yeah, but I'm glad that he's ahead of me, so I can be like,
what do I do?
how's it going?
Yeah. 1 o'clock in the morning calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob. Been staring at this slice of pizza for 6 hours.
It's so hard. 75 is so hard.
Walk away.
There's 79 pieces of pepperoni on it.
Wait, can I have
75.
this? Yeah, so I'm going to attempt it. I'm just going to leave it there. I don't want to put any negative or positive spin on it. I'm going to attempt it post-birthday.
You just start over.
Yeah, well, it's that simple.
It's just time.
You just start over. Waste your whole life doing it. Well, we turn 47 and be like, I'm still trying it.
Yeah. That's what Gary says. Gary Vaynerchuk says it's never too late. Yeah, you could be 67. You're still young.
Speaking of Gary, have you guys on TikTok seen the guy that only impersonates Gary Vaynerchuk?
No, but I need to. Is it good?
You'll have to send it to us.
It is so funny. And then Gary responded to it one time and he was like, the fuck? This guy is good. I'll show.
I think my favorite is Mickey Smiggs.
Oh, he's hands down super funny. But you'll get a kick out of this because Gary, working with him, and it's just.
What about you, John?
Super buzzed about our digital workshop. It's finally coming together.
It's gonna be awesome.
Amen.
NoBull Digital Workshop is this webinar series we've been working on for quite a while, and with COVID and our live event and this podcast and just getting everything flowing, it's finally coming together. We have Greg Connolly, the founder of Trifecta, as our presenter. He's going to be presenting on something he is very good at, which is
this dude's unbelievable.
Inbound marketing and the science and the way you as a founder, or an entrepreneur trying to grow a company, step-by-step shit that you can really apply. So September 17th,
Boom.
It's happening. Very pumped. Hey Buzz Nation, are you a Gary Vaynerchuk fan? How about David Meltzer? How about Shay Rowbottom, Constance Schwartz Marini, and more? That's right, NoBull 2020 2.0 is coming up April 8th, 2021. Do you want a free ticket? I know how you can get one. Head over to empathywines.com and buy any 12 bottles of delicious Empathy, Rosé, White, the Red, and use the code NoBull2020 at checkout, and you will get a free $250 front section seating ticket to watch Gary, to watch Shay, and to watch all the amazing speakers April 8th. Head over to NoBull2020.com for more info, and we'll see you there. On today's show, we have the buzzworthy human being, Nate Scherotter. Nate has started his career as an executive assistant to Gary Vaynerchuk, and since 2009, Nate has been one of Gary's most trusted minds. Nate's role grew to leading operations at VaynerMedia, helping to enable agency growth from $10 million to $150 million. Whoo-wee! in under 6 years' time. His expansive knowledge of business development and internal structuring has been fundamental in launching Empathy Wines and its pioneering mission in the direct-to-consumer industry. As the COO of Empathy Wines, he oversaw the logistics, compliance, finances, operations of one of the fastest growing digitally native wine brands. And for those of you who haven't been tapped into the news and the business community, after just 18 months in business, Empathy Wines was purchased by Constellation Brands. Nate, you had a huge play in that, and you're now the VP of Direct-to-Consumer Operations for Constellation Brands. Man, Buzz Nation, please welcome Nate Scherotter. Nate, what's up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Gosh.
I haven't heard my bio out loud in a while.
It was impressive, right?
I tried to give us some energy. Oh, yeah. Crap, you've done a lot, though.
Rockstar. And 18 months.
Thank you.
But before we get into all the amazing questions about you and the business, we have a little segment called the pregame.
Yes.
Al, what's the pregame?
Pregame is super simple. Fly. Gone. Free association. Whatever comes to your mind, let it come out. If it's inappropriate, we're leaving it in. Just so you know.
I need a quick sip of wine before this, and I'll be good to go.
There you
quick
go.
sip of wine. I'll wait. Let's ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. If you had a boat, what would you name it?
Albatross.
Love it. What is your most useless talent?
My most useless talent.
Yeah.
I'm a good ping pong player, which is fairly useless. Like, what am I going to do?
Debatable.
I mean,
You get caught in a ping pong challenge.
unless you find yourself in the middle of it.
Yeah. Like, I like that talent, but it's not going to do anything for me.
Well, there you have it. In high school, you would be voted most likely to what?
You know, I was in the yearbook for most fashionable, which made no sense.
Okay.
I wore like golf clothes or something.
Okay. Favorite comedy movie?
Wedding Crashers.
Dig it. Current celebrity crush?
Crush?
Current celebrity crush.
Oh boy. You know, it's kind of always been Shakira.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm just doing like the hips.
Doing the hips, yeah.
Hips don't lie thing. Because now I'm like, maybe it's Shakira for me now, suddenly.
Yeah, it's kind of been like forever and always.
Fantastic. Wait, just side note. What did you think of her at the Super Bowl?
I thought it was great.
Fantastic.
I don't think you can top that.
Yeah, you cannot. No more Super Bowls.
That is correct. That's correct.
There might not be.
I know. Fill in the blank. 2020 is
Crazy.
How many glasses of wine before hashtag it's too late to say sorry?
How many glasses of wine? How many are in a bottle? Probably 6 glasses.
Then that's over.
Yeah, then it's pretty much done.
Okay. True or false? Morgan Freeman might actually be God.
There's a chance. It's more likely than not.
And I couldn't agree more. From what movie does this quote come from? Pull over. No, it's a cardigan, but thanks for asking.
I don't know.
Dumb and Dumber. That's fine.
My wife's favorite movie.
Favorite food and why?
Favorite food and why? It's got to be like a cacio e pepe pasta.
Okay, all right, love it. Fill in the blank. Today is
Full of meetings.
okay. Done. That's it. There's the pregame. Well done.
Nailed it. You nailed the pregame.
I got through it in one piece.
There it is.
You did. But now is the time when we cheers to our guest, you, Nate, and something ridiculous. So cheers, Nate, to life, love, lots of laughter, and at one point or another, talking like Arnold Schwarzenegger alone in your car.
Get down.
Get down.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on. So we have a lot to learn from you, Nate, and we want our listeners and our viewers to be inspired by your story because it's a really cool one. A lot has happened, that can certainly be inspiring. So before we dive into the history that is your entrepreneurial career and your business career, tell us a little bit about where Empathy is right now in the marketplace. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so Empathy, as you said before, is a digitally native wine brand. And by that, I mean, we built the brand through digital channels, mostly social channels, Instagram, Facebook. Obviously, having Gary Vaynerchuk as a co-founder in the business gives you a nice base and a nice audience to launch a brand on. A lot of people that have recently followed Gary don't really know that he grew his career in the wine industry. So he took over his dad's liquor store operations and grew it from a $3 million to $50 million business by betting on email marketing and digital commerce before everyone else. So a lot of Gary's career was spotting trends, jumping on them, test and learn. And he did that, he was one of the first 3 .coms to sell wine on it. So Gary built up, and he also did 1,000 episodes of Wine Library TV where he tasted wine every single day and reviewed it and built his own community and own brand. So a lot of people don't know that, a huge part of his career was in the wine industry. And then it shifted over to business, which is kind of how I followed him in his career. But Empathy Wines is a digitally native wine brand. We sell direct to consumer. So you won't find us in any liquor store, any restaurants anymore. We sell 100% of our product now online at empathywines.com. The reason we did that, direct to consumer is kind of a buzz phrase over the past couple of years. But in the wine industry, the middlemen are there's kind of two middlemen in that business. It goes from manufacturer to distributor to retailer to you. And so when we started this business, we said, we know growers out in Northern California. We can source really great grapes at a good price. We can go direct to consumer. Obviously, shipping is a factor in wine. That costs a decent amount, but we can go direct to consumer and get them the best possible product that we can for the price. And so that was our mission. And everything was kind of, the North Star was the best wine that we can get to the customer for the best price. So that was how we thought of the brand initially. We chose the name Empathy for a few different reasons. Gary speaks about empathy as being a superpower and in business and in life, which I subscribe to. And throughout my entire career with Gary and starting this new career with Constellation, empathy is such a factor in being able to get work done and get work done efficiently, I think. So we didn't want to name it like Gary Vineyards or anything like that. We wanted the brand to have a mission and a purpose behind it. And then it tied really nicely together with the farmers. On the back of our first vintage of bottles, it said, empathy for the farmer, empathy for you. Mm-hmm. So throughout this process, we wanted to tell these farmer stories. We kind of wanted to be almost a marketing arm for them, produce content for them, help build their brands, and in turn, get the customer the best value we could. So we are almost through our second vintage now. We have our 2018 rosé and white wine in the markets. We have our 2019 red wine in the market, or 2018 red wine in the market. We're going to bottle for our 2019 red wine soon. And then we also just released some canned rosé and bubbles.
I saw that.
For the summer, which has been really well received. So that's where we're at now in a nutshell.
Sounds like a rocket ship.
Fantastic.
Question for you. So you started as Gary's executive assistant, right? And I don't know what your career was before that, or if that was sort of your first in, but just being an observer of Gary as the brand, as well as all of the things that he as a person does, you've got to be on your shit pretty well to make it from going from his executive assistant to then being the COO of a startup of his and continuing to move forward. Can you give us your own identification? What qualities do you possess to be able to weather that storm, all of those storms, all the way through?
Yeah. So as a brief background, I interned for Gary twice at a couple of his wine companies when I was in college. So that was, I guess, 12 years ago now. And then out of college, I moved to New York from Arizona to become his assistant. Mm-hmm. I moved to New York actually without a job title. I didn't know I was going to be his assistant until like the first day I got into the office, which is a fun fact. He's like, just move out here and you'll get a feel the first week and we'll figure out what role's best, which was not the case. So,
Wow, dude.
so I was his assistant. I like to say that I was a little bit of a yin to his yang. I'm much more introverted. I'm much more detail oriented. I love spreadsheets, which I think most people don't say. So I think that the skill set of being an assistant fit really well with what I like to do in general. I never thought of myself as an organized person, but at the same time, I love spreadsheets. So it evolved into a role where I could do it really well. I knew how to do it efficiently. I was able to start being proactive. Scheduling, there's only so many hours in a day. There's only so many things we can schedule. So I found ways to be proactive and, built out CRMs for his life and said, how can we, instead of being defensive by being an assistant, how can we start being on the offensive and being an assistant? And so I think when that switch flipped, I think that was something that kind of showed him that, I could take on more than just, calendaring events.
Yeah.
And how long did that take?
It was a while. It probably took at least a full 12, 14 months before I got I was in the flow of things. I was his assistant for about 3 years. And after it was probably after a year and a half, I'm like, okay, all this day-to-day stuff, I got that. I can do that. Obviously mistakes happen. You hear about said mistakes. But after 16 months, I kind of got into the flow where I could take on more and start being more proactive.
And then what happened after 3 years?
I became the CEO of his book, which I think I might be the first and only CEO of a book. So it was Jab, 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 Right Hook, which I think was his third business book. It was all about content marketing and for social media at the time. And he looked at me and he said, Nate, you're going to be CEO of Jab, 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 Right Hook. And I'm calling you that because that's how I want you to think. Do you get it? And I'm like, I think so.
I got it. Yeah.
I got it. So I pretty much ran his entire book launch, helped with the writing and the project management of writing it, and worked with him to do all the sales and marketing for his book. After that, we didn't really know what I was going to do within his world. And so instead of going to him and just kind of being like, well, what's next? I went to him and I said, my objective in the long run is to start a business with you. And whatever my next move is, I want to help build those skills to get there and to do that. And so he said, oh, you should work with my brother, AJ. AJ was the COO of VaynerMedia at the time. And me and AJ, I think AJ's smarter than me, but have a similar mindset in terms of detail-oriented spreadsheets, problem solving through logic. So I went and worked with AJ on the operations side pretty much for the rest of my VaynerMedia career. So I worked on operations for about 5 years after that. And just really focused on how do we make the agency as efficient as possible? How do we improve on, a lot of what I did was how do we improve on bottom line versus top line? Gary's the king of the top line.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we were doing, we're putting systems and processes and technology in place to understand, what is happening at the agency and how can we continue to improve.
I want to stick on that for just a second because so you have this career of growing up in the whatever Vaynerchuk sphere, right? Like as you're coming up, and then you get thrust into the agency operations, right? There's these 5-decade-old agencies and all these people probably coming in the doors and some of the younger community coming in, and you guys are building this what obviously was a really fast-growing agency. And so I have a small marketing company also, and so I'm deal with all of this kind of growth and strategy. How do you keep up the pace of growth when you don't have any experience in how agencies work, and you're still able to scale it from 10 to $150 million? I mean, of course, there's failures and mistakes and things like that, and chaos probably at all times. But you kept it going. You kept the wheel rolling.
Yeah, obviously, all of the credit to Gary and AJ. I mean, again, Gary drove that top line, which made us have to focus on how do we scale this efficiently. The agency was bootstrapped for a long time. And, it's not a publicly traded company by any means. Gary I think has said this before many times, but Gary was independently wealthy outside of the agency, which was a good thing and a freeing thing for him in the business, because we didn't have to make 20% at the end of the year. We could get by on 5, or we could even break even and still be able to grow, because Gary was independently wealthy and he was the owner of the business along with AJ. So that gave us a little bit of freedom to not make decisions based on the bottom line. Mm-hmm. I think Gary always drove the top line, and when you're in a growth mode, making decisions on the bottom line slow down things.
Absolutely.
So for us, it was saying, what do we need to get in place to ensure we can grow in a smart, efficient way while not hindering growth? So that was kind of the task at hand for us. And that was VaynerMedia for 6, 7, 8 years. It's been in growth mode for a long time. When I was working on operations, we probably went through 3 or 4 restructurings at least. And a lot of the restructurings didn't really have to, obviously, when you restructure things, you want to help the bottom line, but most of the restructurings are about, how do we get work done faster? How do we potentially charge clients less for the work, because we can get it done faster? Because our value proposition was, you're paying way too much money to other agencies. We can get this done faster and cheaper. Creative is subjective, but speed isn't. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our decisions were about, how do we get faster and faster and faster? How do we keep building a culture that people want to work at, knowing that 5, 10, 15 years down the road, obviously you're going to have to start making money. So it was setting up that structure of speed and efficiency, because we knew that would get the clients we needed to make money down the road.
Now, before we get into the transition to Empathy Wines here, and that growth, what is the time investment to launching and starting all of these things? What does that look like for you, in the rest of your life personally? From
like a starting Empathy Wines side of thing?
No, so your growth from being an executive assistant to Gary, and then
oh, got it.
And then working as the some of the leadership of VaynerMedia. The time requirement to launching something that grows this fast is without a doubt
I was
large.
Yeah, I was a full-time employee at VaynerMedia, so this was after my internships, but I was a full-time employee at VaynerMedia for 9 years.
Oh, yeah.
Did you get it?
Oh. John. 2 strikes.
What, are you the Karate Kid? You're not going to get it.
For those of you listening on the podcast, we're trying to kill a fly right now. Anyway, sorry.
So a 9-year commitment there.
Yeah, and Gary knew the whole time that my end ambition was not to work in an agency forever. Mm-hmm. He knew I had an entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't know that the first business that I started outside of the agency would be with Gary. I always thought that would be a nice way to start a business. But I'd probably say after year 3, we were both in the same page that the agency wasn't where I was going to end up, and let's take the next steps to build out a skill set and to prove that I could, take over something for him. So that was about, so full, 9 years full-time Vayner and 6 years full-time at Vayner, knowing that I was going to be doing something else in the future, just didn't know when.
And how many hours a week was that on average?
Oh, when you're working with Gary, you're always on.
All hours of week.
It's true, but it taught, being his assistant taught me how to work. I had jobs in college, kind of normal jobs, but I didn't really know what work was until I started working for Gary. So the work ethic that you just it's not even that I felt like I was working so many hours, it's the osmosis of being next to someone like Gary, and, that fire driving your fire. So I don't want to make it sound like I was always on and that sucked. It was more of like, how do I continue to help power this powerhouse? Mm-hmm. So it was more of like a not a game, but just something that I wanted to continue to succeed on.
Yeah.
It's so funny and true, what you're saying. And we see this all the time from like bringing energy to this podcast, right? Like the more energy, we bring, like we're killing flies and, whatever, being just
Authentic
good people and authentic, right? Being next to that, I see it every day in Good Monster, and the more I share and energy that I bring, like the more everyone else kind of comes along with it. So I can't even imagine, now being aware that Gary's the same person, for the most part in private that he is in public eye, and being next to that every day couldn't help but prepare you for, the roles that you're taking on today.
100%. I definitely became, not a different person, but definitely a much more ambitious person, harder working, more focused, by just being next to Gary.
Yeah.
And, I think that there's something to be said about, because you felt that way organically, and that even though it was difficult and challenging and a little bit of a struggle at times, or a big struggle at times, the draw, like as if it wasn't your business, but you were treating it as if it was. Like Gary, he'll often say, like, your employees don't own the business, so don't ever expect them to work as hard as you do. But when you find a guy like you, or when Gary finds a guy like you that is actually treating it like it's their own, that's a big find. That's a big thing right there.
Yeah, and I would say the way that Gary does it really well, and I think that VaynerMedia, and I haven't worked at VaynerMedia for a few years now, but for your boss to understand what your ambitions are, what your goals are, and to help you get to that is an awesome thing. Me and Gary knew that this was the case, and I was happy to put my head down for 9 years and prove myself out. I'm not naive to the fact that I was coming out of college 10 years ago, and I wasn't going to be served anything because I didn't deserve anything. Mm-hmm. And so it was a game of patience. But I think for any boss to understand who their employees are, where they want to get, and helping them get there is the way to build a successful organization from a people standpoint. Very few people are going to stay with you forever. Mm-hmm. So how can you set them up for success for their next thing and rinse and repeat?
Here we are.
So let's talk about enter Empathy Wines a little bit here, right? So I had the pleasure of watching the launch, and sort of how you grew, and from a marketing standpoint, because that's my world, that's what I love. You've done a great job with the branding, and brand is so huge, right? It could be the driver of most direct-to-consumer brands, should be the driver of most direct-to-consumer brands, especially in today's day and age with social media and things like that. So you guys obviously rocked that. But talk about just some of the ideation of this, right? Like, so, okay, here's this idea that whoever had it, you can talk about who had the idea and like where it all came from and how it came together, especially with John, right? So, yep. How did you guys really prepare for this? What was the time period of getting all the pieces together? And then what was the launch strategy? That's sort of what I want to know. Launch being, first 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever.
Got it. So John and I started working on the project about 14 months before any wine was in a customer's hand. So the wine industry is a challenging industry to get into because it's capital intensive. It's agriculture, especially if you're making your own wine, which we are. We're not buying bulk juice and just putting it in a bottle. We're buying grapes. We have a winemaker. We work with the winemaker stylistically to say this is what we want to do. So it took a long time to go from, well, we're doing this to having a product in people's hands. A lot of that had to do with the farming process. The other aspects had to do with legal and compliance. Alcohol is a regulated business. Yeah. Every state has different laws. So getting up and running from a legal and compliance perspective probably took about 8 months. And then the farming process probably took about 10 months. So once we had the growers lined up, once we had the winemaker lined up, we had all of the infrastructure ready to go. The launch process, largely was using Gary and Gary's community to initially launch the brand and build the brand. So that was kind of on one side of it is, Gary's built, you could argue that what Gary's done in his entire career was to be able to launch Empathy Wines. And by that, I mean, he grew his dad's liquor store from a $3 to $50 million business. He grew his personal brand to where he has, I don't know, it's like 9 million followers on Instagram now. So he built this audience and this permission to be able to launch products that people believed. He had this audience that he was able to sell to. When I was running the book launch for him, people always asked him, how do you market a book? And he said, you have to start 3 years before you even start writing it. And that's because building community will help you sell things. Building yourself as an expert in whatever field you want to be that expert or that voice in. It's not just, I'm going to start putting out content when I have a book. It's, I'm going to do this forever, because who knows when the next book's coming? Who knows when I want to launch a bottle of wine? And so a lot of his growth through his career and his growth through his personal brand was to be able to launch a wine brand successfully. So that was kind of on one end of it. The other end of it was true, I'll call it, D2C marketing, in terms of, identifying what our value proposition is, creating a ton of content, testing that content in the marketplace, seeing what resonates. We came to this business from a very customer-centric view. I think that's another buzz term right now. But everything that we did in this business was putting ourselves in the customer's shoes. So the price point of $20 a bottle was very intentional. We know that 90% of wine in America is bought, I think, under $13 a bottle. But our value proposition is, this bottle of wine would cost you $35, $40, $45 in a store, depending on where you are. If you spend $14 on a bottle, level up $6 and get so much more value. Or if you're a Silver Oak drinker, or if you pop $35, $40 bottles of wine on a Thursday at dinner, you can save $20 a bottle and be able to have a really quality bottle that doesn't break the bank by any means. So the price point was intentional. The blends were intentional, and the wines that we made, we wanted to make it very American palate friendly. There's a little bit of residual sweetness in there. There's a good amount of acid in there. So we had a very distinct profile that we wanted to take. And then through our marketing approach was very customer centric, in terms of we don't decide, we have our value propositions. We know what the brand stands for, but we don't decide, what marketing message is going to be the message for the year. We test 10, 20, 30 different things, see what resonates, and then we build off of those things. So we know who we are as a brand, but from a launch strategy was, let's test a ton of different pieces of content. Let's see what works. And then let's continue to build on that until it doesn't work anymore. And then let's do it again. So that's how we think about, I think if you guys listen to Gary, that's how we think about marketing in general, is just bottom up approach, customer first. Me, Gary, and John aren't going into Gary's office and saying, this is the thing that we're launching with. It's, here's the 30 things that we're launching with. Yeah. And let's see what works.
Yeah. What was the end result as it is today? Was that always the game plan? Or is that something that kind of came out of a little bit of right field and, hey, here's an opportunity, let's pursue it?
In terms of the acquisition?
Yeah.
I don't think any brand or any company should really start saying that this is going to be acquired. I think that that's not the best way to start a business. I think it sets you up for potentially making the wrong decisions as you grow the business. But we knew that what we were building in the industry that we were building it in, we would catch people's eyes. Even us building out our e-commerce experience on Shopify was kind of unheard of in the wine industry. A few different wineries were on Shopify, but everything else wasn't. Right. But we chose Shopify because we knew it would deliver the most customer-centric experience through an e-commerce sale. So the way we were thinking about things from the onset was customer first, and how we marketed it was very different. And so we knew we would catch people's eyes. But it wasn't our intention on the upfront to say, we're going to sell this thing in 18 months. By no means did we think that was going to happen.
I want to go back just a little bit, just for context for our audience, in that For people out there that are on a path where they're, they put their 9 years and their 10 years and they want to get to the next level, they want to start a business with whoever. What was the moment for you? Was it you that said, because you didn't come from the wine industry, Gary did, but how did you get to that conversation where you're saying, okay, do you want to start the tea come to you? Like what was the moment, and did you think it was going to be wine?
We had a few glasses of wine before that moment.
Yeah.
Well, so I interned and John worked with Gary in the wine industry for our internships. So John has a huge passion for wine. I had a real interest in wine as a 19, 20-year-old. For some reason, I found wine fascinating. And the way I found Gary was that I was just searching Google for wine terms and learning about wine. And I came across his Wine Library TV videos, and I randomly sent him an email saying, I want to intern for you. And he responded and said, yeah, let's do it. So I had an interest in wine, but as Gary's career evolved, I kind of evolved with him.
Right.
Still definitely had an interest in wine, but just didn't work on it on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Me and John drank it on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah.
Market research.
Yeah, but when we went to Gary, it was mostly me and John going to Gary with this idea. Me and John were brainstorming about, what could be next for us and what do we think we could be really successful at. And for us, it was kind of a no-brainer in terms of, if you looked at the landscape of the wine industry, there's very few people building wine brands like we were. And then, I'd say arguably no one with the permission that Gary had from both the marketing and wine side of things to do this. So when we brought it to him, we were confident in the ability for us to be successful.
Right. Was he immediately like, yep, I'm in, just let's work out the details? Or was he like, oh, let's talk this through?
He was very interested from the onset. It took probably a few months for us to really officially say that we're doing this. A lot of it is because, if Gary, this is kind of the first thing, outside of Gary's brand from a consumer goods product, that he put his name on and put on the market. And so for him, he wanted to make sure that he had the time to dedicate to it, for it to be successful, that we had the resources we needed for it to be successful. So I think that was a little bit of kind of soul searching on his end of, can I pull this off with my crazy schedule?
Right.
But me and John put together some decks and sold him on the vision, and we were good to go from there.
So a few podcasts ago, we interviewed the iconic gentleman, and the iconic fellas.
Mark and
Mark and Jeff, and we talked a little bit about them, and it seems right like there's a specific type of work that comes along with like being around Gary, right? Like, so those two guys hustle, they were talking about how they're roommates, like they live in the same apartment.
A similar story is sewn through all these things.
But Gary aside, right? So do you feel that you were like born or created or destined to like be on the track that you're in, or was it, so to speak, created? So we talked to a lot of different entrepreneurs, and they're from all different backgrounds, right? And talk to them about similar things. And some of them are like, yes, I feel like I was meant to do this. Like I just needed to find it. And in other ones, it's a product of your environment, right? Which do you feel like is fitting for you?
To be completely honest, I think it's a product of the environment.
Yeah.
I had some entrepreneurial tendencies as a child and growing up, but nothing crazy by any means. I think, again, the osmosis of being around Gary, moving from, the suburbs of Tempe, Arizona to New York City was shocking to the system in a good way. The energy in New York is something that I've never experienced before. And so I think that it was definitely something that was created, but created rather quickly after all that.
Well, now here you are. What are some of your favorite things about being a leader, an entrepreneur? You mentioned the spreadsheets and the numbers and things like that, and everyone has their own strengths. we talk about, if bet on your strengths and if we just had an episode actually where we talked about, weaknesses and overcoming your weaknesses and figuring out a way to deal with them. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What are your favorite things to work on as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say, I've always been a problem solver. I've always felt like I'm fairly logical. And so I would say through building this business, especially in the wine industry, again, which is a regulated industry, high barrier of entry to get in from a lot of reasons. Logistics in this business are very complex. You're shipping alcohol across state lines. That's a glass product. That's a heavy product. So I do believe that building a direct-to-consumer brand requires a good level of problem solving, of identifying inefficiencies and understanding where we can exceed versus the market. Also making bets based off of what you see others doing. So, for example, our packaging, which I know that y'all have received quite a few packages.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think you see this in a lot of DTC brands, is super specifically engineered packaging for the specific bottle that you're getting, which was awesome for the first 6 months. But then we had our red wine pop up that was a different bottle, and then we had a new vintage pop up. And so 6 months in, I'm like, if someone orders 6 bottles, they're going to be shipped in 2 packages. Like that's going to be 30% more to ship 2 packages than if we designed packaging that just fit all sizes of our bottles. Like we need to fix this immediately.
Yeah.
So in any business that you build, there's going to be, for me at least, a ton of logistics and operations efficiencies to figure out in the first 6 to 12 months. I don't think anyone going into being an entrepreneur and starting a business is going to have their supply chain figured out from day one. I don't think anyone's going to have their, the logistics and operations are just going to evolve and iterate. And I think the faster you can do that, the more attractive you become as a company, the more customer centric you can become. We had a high rate of breakage in our first shipment out to consumers, which I didn't assume would be a thing at all. I'm like,
that's interesting. Yeah.
And it wasn't incredibly high. We were at 0.5%, but the industry standard was 0.3%. So, percentage wise, it's significantly higher. And when you're shipping out thousands of packages, it matters. So for that was how I kind of saw this business and operated it through the lens of my strengths. And then John on the other side definitely comes from more of a marketing background with the agency. And so he helped oversee a lot of the creative and marketing as we started up and built out kind of that infrastructure and that team.
Nice.
Do you see yourself as now becoming a serial entrepreneur, and that, obviously the acquisition happened, you'll be doing the VP thing for a while, I'm sure. But what's next for you? Are you going to be like, okay, now I'm gonna start, we're going to try something else? Is it now in your blood so much that this is like,
it's funny. The Constellation acquisition was really great for a few reasons. One, I think our wine's going to get better, which is awesome. Just because of all the infrastructure and team and scale that they have behind them. I just think that the product's going to be a lot better. But two, what me and John are brought in to do at Constellation is almost to be, I'll call it entrepreneurs. And so we're bringing a skill set and hiring a team that is going to kind of replicate what Empathy did with some of their iconic brands. They do sell direct to consumer right now, but we're going to be building them out on our tech stack and integrating with our kind of operations and fulfillment. So it's interesting because, Constellation is a very different than being an entrepreneur in a 6-8 person team. But what I'm doing in Constellation is very much being an entrepreneur inside of that business.
Nice.
So I'm really excited about it. I think there's a ton of opportunity in the wine industry for direct-to-consumer sales, for brands to be built more socially and digitally. And the thing that I'm kind of most excited about is how does building more brand digitally, how does selling more wine digitally, and how does collecting more and more data from an e-commerce perspective help all other aspects of their business, from wholesale to tasting room. And so I think we can kind of be this tip of the spear inside an organization that hasn't really focused on DTC too much.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I have, long story short, I have no plans after this. This is a big task at hand. It's something that we're really excited about. And,
awesome.
we'll see what happens.
So we asked this question to a lot of our guests, and it's a really great question to kind of close out the interview. Everyone has a different measure of success, personally, professionally, whatever it might be, right? What is Nate Scherotter's measure of success in life?
In life.
Other than being most fashionable in high school.
Yes, other than that. That's already achieved. So
Check.
Yeah.
The box.
Check the box.
Yeah.
I mean, where do I go from there?
really nowhere. We can just end now if you want.
We're done.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny going through this whole building a business process and entrepreneurship process and starting a business with one of your best friends. And I've learned a lot about myself over the past couple of years. But it's become really evident to me that, building a successful business is only really doable if other aspects of your life are good. The support that I had from my girlfriend and my family was, I don't know if I could have done it without that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just building those relationships. I think if you can build relationships with the right people, for example, Gary, when I moved to New York, I had a good group of friends at home, but obviously you lose touch with those people. But a lot of my good friends have stayed, and we talk every day. Building that community in New York with a bunch of really smart, hungry, ambitious people, I think becomes this catalyst to success and to happiness. I think the craziest thing is that I sent Gary an email. I didn't know the guy. And I said, that's someone that I want to be close to. That's someone that I want to learn from. That's the type of person I want in my life. And so for me, it's just understanding that the reason that I am where I am is based off the people that I've met and hard work as well.
Sure.
But being able to just continue to build those relationships and to identify those relationships and to invest in them is something that I don't know if it's what I want to be known by, but it's just something that I want to be pervasive throughout the next 20, 30, 50 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's sure a great way to go through life is making positive connections for sure and human interactions. So thank you so much for being on here, Nate. Listen, we wish you the best of luck, and not that you're going to need it, but your hard work and hustle alongside an amazing brand. We can't wait to see the next 5 years. Or 18 months even. Jesus.
I know, right?
We can't wait to see the next 18 months of Empathy Wines and drink the next 18 months of Empathy Wines. So cheers to you, man, and cheers to empathy.
Cheers. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
As always, we are super appreciative to those who watch and listen to this podcast. Remember, Facebook and YouTube, you can watch our ugly mugs for an hour, as well as our wonderful guests. Or you can listen on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. But as always, cheers to life and business. May we all prosper in both.
Cheers.